Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video from Aman Talks NRL SuperCoach. In today's video, we're going to finally go through my preseason team draft. Having got a little bit more information, having thought about it, my team a little bit more, seen a few trial matches as well. And so I thought it would be a good idea just to go through my current team, what I'm thinking about in terms of certain players. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video and get some value out of it. If you do, really appreciate a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing to the channel as well if you want to see more content, and let's get straight into it. So no messing around, we'll get straight into the draft here. I wanted to show the whole team as it was, just to kind of show you as to why I've chosen certain players in certain positions as well. Just taking a quick look at the hookers, I've been pretty firm on having Chris Randall. I do think that he's probably the best cheapie hooker to go for. He might not play the full 80 minutes for the Knights, but at 245k, he could be a good plug-in option, at least for round one when Harry Grant's unavailable. Just maybe get us 45, 50 points potentially with a good work rate and good base. And then he can obviously maybe be a handy play option as well, but make us some decent money at the start of the season. So not too really much more to say, I think, around the selection of Randall. Now, Harry Grant, I think what we saw last season with hooker was that it wasn't really an exciting position. There wasn't too many players that were noteworthy. You've obviously got Damien Cook, Harry Grant, Reid Marnie as probably your top three options. But I kind of do strongly believe that Grant will be the best option for the entire season. And so I'm kind of thinking maybe it's just best to have him from the start of the season, just saving myself that trade early in the season, knowing that I'm going to want him eventually. And having that flexibility of having Chris Randall to plug in from round one. I think having Grant on the bench, I'm fine with that for at least one round. And I do think that he is the best hooker to go for. So I'm happy enough to have him in the starting team just to save a trade down the line. Now, front row forward, a couple of changes here to what I showed in my earlier live stream. Payne Haas, I think, is the go-to front row forward to go for. I think it's a good price at 595k. He was a little bit more expensive than that last season, and we saw some good signs as well from the back end of last year from Payne Haas. So I do like Payne Haas at sub 600k. Now, Jai Arrow, he is a new one. He wasn't in my previous draft that I had kind of tinkered around with. The reason I've gone with Arrow is that Oitikamanu didn't have the best performance in the trials. Maybe I shouldn't read too much into trials, but with Arrow, there may be potential for a resurgence, maybe with some extra minutes. I do like the fact that he is dual flexibility as well. You can get him in front row forward and at second row forward as well. 450k I think is a decent price. I really do like that dual flexibility though, and I think you'll see obviously in my second row forward I've got Tavita Pangai Jr., another second row forward, front row forward dual player. I think having those two in those two slots can help with flexibility down the line, and especially in the early parts of the season I do like that option. So Arrow, he partly does fill that role, but I do think that he is also a decent mid-range option and front row forward. Again, front row forward is probably not a spot I'm going to look to do too many trades in if I can avoid it. So we've got a set and forget option in Payne Haas. Jai Arrow obviously can get rotated, but we can also plug in Tavita Pangai Jr. if we need to get in someone in second row forward instead. And now on the bench, not too many front row forward, I think cheapy options to go for. Tupai Moroa from the Storm, he could potentially be an option in the early parts of the season as a cash cow maybe, given that there's still some uncertainty over Tui Kamikamika and Nelson Asafa Solomona, so he's in there at the moment at 205k. Similar story with, I'm going to try to pronounce it, Momowisa. Let's hopefully I didn't butcher that pronunciation, but he is due to be playing in the second row forward for the Knights in the trials match. Maybe if he jags a bench spot in the forwards for the Knights, they do have a pretty good forward pack, so I'm not too comfortable with that. But he's just there at the moment as a kind of cheap, dual flexible, cheapy player, and that's something I do think about as well, is that when I'm picking cheapy guys, this is kind of placeholders. If I can, I'll try to get them to be dual flexible just to have that added flexibility at the beginning of the season. Now, second row forward, originally I didn't have Dave Fafita, but after watching that trials match, knowing what he did last season, I thought I probably should just try to fit him into a draft, because obviously if I can fit him in, I can always downgrade to someone else if I need to create extra funds, but he is the standout second row forward to go for. I mean, 745k is a lot of money. There was news that he had a bit of a rib issue from the All-Stars game, but apparently that's pretty minor and he's good to go. And I think we know when Fafita's on form, he's an absolute wrecking ball, so I think trying to get him into the draft was definitely a consideration of mine. If I wanted to free up like 100k, I could go down to someone like Angus Crichton, but I thought I can stretch up to Fafita. I may as well just go for it and see, obviously, come the first official team list Tuesday, see kind of what cheapies are on offer, because obviously the more cheapies available, we can fit in more of these gun options like Fafita. Tavita Pangai Jr., I did touch on him just before. I do like that dual flexibility at 570k, playing on a left edge. I think for the Bulldogs, outside of Matt Burton, we always know that he can get attacking stats. He loves an offload as well. Bulldogs do have a tough start to the season, but Pangai is one of those players who can probably get points against anyone given that he's playing in the forwards, so I don't mind starting with him. Again, I like that 2RF and front row forward option. And Ewan Aiken, he's got dual flexibility as well at second row forward and centre wing. Should be playing in the back row for the Warriors. They've got a great early season draw. He was killing it at the back end of last season as well, playing in the back row. I think he had an average of 65 plus, I want to say. I can't remember top of my head, but the base average was pretty good. I think it was around 54. So that's pretty good for a 486k option who we can slot in at centre wing as well if we need to. I do like him as a mid-range price option in the second row forward. Again, the bench, there's not too much to speak of. It's kind of all placeholders at the moment, pending Team List Tuesday. But we've got Bullimore. But now that we've got news of Schuster's injury for the Sea Eagles, Bullimore maybe gets a left edge role if he does get starting second row forward position for the Sea Eagles, especially playing on an edge. We know that Manly are a very good attacking team. We did even see him set up a try for Ruben Garrick in the trials match, so he has maybe got that ability to offload, get some attacking stats. Again, I like the fact that he's 2RF and front row forward, so he's in there at the moment. Piakura and Howarth from the Broncos and the Storm respectively. Piakura's, he's going to be suspended for initial rounds of the season, but 188k, maybe he's in line to get a starting gig, so he's just kind of in there as a placeholder. And Howarth, again, similar option where we know that there's potentially a lack of forwards at the beginning of the season for the Storm. Supposedly there's good raps on the guy as well, that he's a very quality player, so 175k, again, placeholder just for a cheap option. Ideally, obviously, we can have these guys, but come Team List Tuesday, I understand that I might have to change a lot of these players because I might not be able to get away with having these 175k options, but if they start, that'd be great because I do think that having depth is important. Just getting onto the second screenshot now that we've covered the forwards. So Cleary's in the draft at the moment. Again, similar with Fafita, I wanted to be able to make a draft where, say, if Cleary's fit for round 1, I'm going to want him, basically. And I think if I don't have a draft all preseason where I don't have Cleary, and then I have to struggle to try to get up to him, I thought it'd be easier to start with the bigger guns like Fafita and Cleary, and then kind of work my way down. You know, if Cleary's not fit for round 1, I'll go without him. And then so obviously it's a lot easier to say go from Cleary to Kiri, save myself like 400k, and then I can use that to bump up, maybe my center wing, maybe the front row forward, or maybe just beef up the bench in general. So Cleary's in there at the moment. I think obviously he's a fantastic captain option. Its first 6 games are not too bad. I'll just quickly read them out here. So you've got Manly, Dragons, Newcastle, Rabbitohs, Bulldogs, and Broncos. So you can definitely see Cleary being a captain option in round 2 against the Dragons, round 3 against the Knights, and then again even in round 5 and 6 when he's got the Bulldogs and the Broncos. So Cleary, I think for that captaincy potential, 950k is a lot of money to pay for him, especially when he's just coming back off a pretty significant injury. But if he's fit and clear for round 1, I think you just kind of have to go for him. He's the best halfback by far. And then Lachlan Ilias, don't think there's too much debate around this slot. Obviously you could get him in at 5'8 as well. I do like the fact that he is dual listed as well, and he's been widely tipped to be the starting halfback for the Rabbitohs in replacement of Adam Reynolds. So I think at 205k, it just seems like a pretty obvious selection in halfback or 5'8 cheapy area. Sean Johnson, I managed to fit him at 5'8 at 462k. I was kind of umming and ahhing about this. I like the fact that he's dual listed. You can tell that I'm trying to be as flexible as I can. I think that's definitely important for the early parts of the season. So I'm trying to think about that a little bit more with my starting season draft. And obviously I'll think about that throughout the season as well. But I do like the fact that he has got that dual listing. It's kind of just a bit of a punt pick, I think, because 5'8", with Munster not being in the picture for round 1, there's a lot of money to carry on your bench, especially if you're also carrying the likes of a Harry Grant. I opted with Grant because I just think he's by far and away the best hooker, whereas I think at 5'8", Munster's up there, but there's a little bit more competition for places maybe. So I've gone with Johnson just to try to capitalise on the Warriors' good draw to begin the season. He should be goal kicking in the early rounds as well, with Reece Walsh being suspended. So yeah, it's a bit of a punt pick, and hopefully he can maybe even make some money or just get some decent points at his price. And then I've got Amon from the Dragons. Now the Dragons do have a tough start to the season, but it's more picking him again. This is a bit of a cheapy option. Hopefully he can make us some money in the early parts of the season. 285k I think is a fine price. You could get him in at center wing and maybe go for instead having Ilias and then like a Blake Taff from the Rabbitohs as your kind of cheapy options in your half and 5'8". At the moment with my squad structure, I've just got him in at 5'8". Obviously I can move that around, but I do think that he is going to be a great cheapie to go for if he does also secure that starting number 6 spot for the Dragons. Now looking at my center wing, a bit of a concern I think for myself with this draft. This is what happens when you spend big in the likes of Cleary, Fafita, and then in the fullbacks as well. You do kind of compromise around the center wing. So I have gone a bit cheap. I have got Tony Staggs though. I do think that he is a good option at 433k. We know how explosive he can be, and he is very highly owned as well by the game. So I think part of also his selection is you don't want to get left behind in the early parts of the season. Like, you can't win Supercoach in round one, but you can probably lose it. If you go for a team full of pods to begin the season and none of them do well, and then a team of high-owned players starts doing very well, and then you're chasing to try to get up to those players, it's maybe a psychological thing as well at the beginning of the season. So Stags is highly owned, but I do think he has merit for that high ownership as well. So Stags, very comfortable having him in the center wing. And then Suwali, Penasini, and Targo from the Panthers. I think comfortably they're all, good cheapy center options. We've got Penasini, should hopefully get a starting gig for the Parramatta Eels. Same with Targo as well. Suwali is a bit of a question mark because we're not entirely sure if he's actually going to be fit for round one. It's, again, just Teamless Tuesday before the beginning of the season is going to be super important. But I do like the fact that if he does get the starting role, apparently at the right wing for the Roosters, I think that's a very profitable position. I mean, 260k, we know he's been tipped as a massive talent for the Roosters, already had a few games last season for us as well. So yeah, Suwali seems like a pretty obvious pick if he is chosen in round one. And then similar with Taylor May, Isaiah Tass and Kay from the Tigers. Kay is just a bit of a placeholder for 175k cheapie. Tass is, again, it's similar. Maybe if he gets a right wing spot for the Rabbitohs, and then Taylor May if he can nab a spot on the bench, or maybe even the starting lineup for the Panthers. So it's the centre wing I'm a little bit concerned about, to be honest, in this draft, because there's some uncertainty with the likes of Suwali, Taylor May, Tass, and Kay. I think if I had to change all of those, it would probably require taking some money out of, say, like a Dave Fafita to down to like an Angus Crichton, and then use that money to kind of beef up that area. So that's kind of the main concern I think I have with this whole draft. I mean, the fullbacks I'm pretty comfortable with, Tedesco and Pappenhausen. I've been pretty vocal so far in this channel about sticking with them two as the two fullbacks to start with. If you want to see my kind of more in-depth thoughts around that, do check out my fullback video where I kind of go into the whole Turbo, Teddy, and Pappenhausen debate. I just think that they can not necessarily match Turbo for points, but for captaincy perspective, you can run with them too. And Cleary, I think they can cover your bases for captaincy purposes. Whereas if you have Turbo, you're probably going to have to, captain him every week to get your value out of that money. So Tedesco and Pappenhausen, the only question mark is Pappenhausen is also maybe a risk of not playing in round one. That would be a big spanner in the works for sure, because I think Pappenhausen is one of the best fullbacks to go for. He was averaging like 111 when he was playing 80-minute games last season, and you can get him at 694k. It just seems like a great value pick. But yeah, again, a question mark. So that's my current draft. You can see below me, it's 5,300 in the bank. So there's not a lot of money to go with. And the overall risk with this draft is that there's a lot of cheapy, 175k guys like Howarth, Piakura, Tass, Kay, and even the front row forwards, like Morea and Momoisia. There's just a lot of cheap options, and we're just not sure, if they're going to start. But it's a kind of a guns enough strategy where going cheap in those areas and hoping they play, it does let you get some of the big guns. I've been able to get Grant, Fafita, Cleary, Tedesco, and Pappenhausen all in the same draft. I really like the look of that. Very solid options as well with like maybe Sean Johnson and Tavita Pangai Jr. and Payne Haas as well. So overall, I do like the draft. If every player here was playing, I'd be very happy with having this team from round one onwards. But I want to quickly also show if, for example, Pappenhausen wasn't fit, and maybe similar with Cleary, maybe what I would change around in terms of the kind of money and the spread of the players. So I'll go into a bit of an alternate draft as well for you guys here. So just having a look at this, I thought it might be interesting to show. I've been so negative, not negative, but I've been more favouring the Tedesco-Pappenhausen combo. But I've got Trbojevic and Tedesco in my fullbacks. You will note that there. So I have fit in Trbojevic in a draft. And to be honest, it didn't make the rest of the team that much worse. It probably does help that I've got a lot of these 175k guys, but you can tell I've had to take out Nathan Cleary and downgrade him to Luke Keary, and then I've also had to downgrade Sean Johnson to make that work a little bit better. So I've had to go down to Jackson Hastings. So immediately the halves just don't look as strong. Instead of Cleary and Johnson, I've got Keary and Hastings. The bench 5'8" and halfback are the same as the previous draft. The entire centre wing is actually the same as well, so I'm keeping that cheap. But again, I've had to take some money out of Dave Fafita. Again, this is kind of these sacrifices you have to make if you are going to run with Turbo to begin the season. But it's Angus Crichton in his place as well, which I think is obviously Crichton is one of the best second row forward picks as well to go for. So everything else about the team is the same though. So I don't mind this overall squad as well, to be honest. And I have got 68k in the bank with this one. So maybe I could use that money to bump up the center wing. Maybe instead of a basement dollar priced player and say like a K, maybe I can use that and maybe stretch to like a Pereira if I can find some extra funds out of the rest of the team, or maybe use that money to say go from Hastings to like a Trindle from the Sharks and then put Keary down in 5'8". So there's different ways that I could play it, But I did want to show a team that has Tom Trbojevic, because I just don't want to say, don't get Turbo, it's too expensive, the rest of your team's not going to look good. I think with a good gun fullback combo of Trbojevic and Tedesco, you can still have an okay team. So that's what I would do maybe if Pappenhausen wasn't fit for round 1. I think ideally if Pappenhausen was fit though, I'd run with him and Tedesco. If Tedesco wasn't fit, I would just go Pappenhausen and Trbojevic probably. But yeah, I thought it might be interesting for you guys to see a team that has Turbo in it, and not just having the Tedesco and Pappenhausen combo. But I do think that this team that I've just got on the screen here is more likely my realistic draft, and that's why I've called it the main draft. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. I don't want to go too much more in depth because there's so many things that we still need to find out about, but hopefully you guys found some interest in this and got some value out of it, made you think about your own team a little bit more and how I'm looking to build a team for the beginning of the season. So if you guys enjoyed it, really appreciate a thumbs up. Do leave any comments below for suggestions for videos that you guys might want to see in the preseason. I obviously want the content to be driven by you guys as much as possible so that you guys get the most value out of it. So definitely subscribe as well to see more content like this. And I'll see you all in the next video.